All right, guys. And the last segment here on today's episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod is probably going to be the one that warrants and generates the most discussion, because we are going to be talking about the Acolyte. So hopefully at this point you guys have seen or haven't seen, but don't care about being spoiled about the first 4 episodes, the first half of this season of the Acolyte, because this will be a full spoiler discussion. So the Acolyte has been getting a lot of controversial, shall we say, opinions being thrown around on the internet. Truly, have I not seen this kind of backlash towards a Star Wars project since The Last Jedi came out, which I, frankly, as somebody who loves The Last Jedi, but I understand there are people who really didn't like The Last Jedi, and there are people who have problems with it, legitimate problems with it, not just, critiques for the sake of being critical, but actually legitimate, dislikes about The Last Jedi. And that's totally fine, by the way. But truly have I not seen this kind of backlash for a Star Wars project since The Last Jedi. And it's frankly not a place where I enjoy being in the Star Wars fandom, because it's just a whole melting pot of negativity and anger, and just sort of really rage being directed towards this series. And before I even get to my own thoughts about this series, and I want to say here first, and I hate that I have to make this disclaimer because it should be obvious, but if you're here listening to this segment or this portion of the podcast, and you're just gonna complain about the Acolyte because of who the characters are inherently, or who the actors are inherently, or anything like that, I mean, this is just not the place for that. I have my problems with the first 4 episodes of the Acolyte, for sure, and I completely respect if you just hate the show. That being said, if you hate the show, and it just please make sure that it's rooted in actual criticism about the story, or about choices that the characters are making, the writing, the dialogue, and just none of this nonsense about against certain people that are in the show, or the actors, or all of that kind of stuff. It's just ridiculous, honestly, at this point. So again, I know I've made this disclaimer a couple times before in other videos. I remember, speaking of The Last Jedi, I had to make this disclaimer in front of The Last Jedi about all the hate that Kelly Marie Tran was receiving, which was just awful. And I want to say that that kind of discussion has no place on this channel. So I just wanted to put that out there. Anyways, though, like I said, I certainly have my problems with the Acolyte, and we will talk about them as well. But I also want to preface those by saying that I do believe we should be a little bit more patient with the show than a lot of people are being. So let's kind of dive in here. The Acolyte, again, is dealing with a time period that I was very interested in, which is prequels, right? While I think that very far into the future is interesting, and it doesn't look like that's what they're going to do. It looks like they're just going to go right into Rey's Jedi Academy or whatever for episode 10. That's fine, whatever. Far into the future is interesting, but I've always been very interested in the lore and the mythology of the Star Wars universe. And so the idea that James Mangold film, which was going to be the Dawn of the Jedi and the Dawn of the Force or whatever, super interesting to me. And while the High Republic is not super far back into the Star Wars lore, it was pretty far back, right? And so I was very interested in this time period and in this show. Also, the fact that the trailers, I know a lot of people really hated the trailers. I was not one of them. I thought that the trailers were great. I don't quite get what the complaints are, at least in the trailers, about the visuals, because I thought that they looked fine. I think a couple of them looked very clean, if that's what people were complaining about. And yeah, I mean, sure, you can kind of tell that they're in the volume a couple times, but the trailers I was a big fan of. And I was just excited to see a cast of new characters. I mean, Lee Jung-jae is a fantastic actor. I loved him in Squid Game. Haven't seen a lot of the other actors, other than Carrie-Anne Moss, for example, in The Matrix. But Amandla Stenberg I haven't really seen a lot of. I guess I actually found out recently that she was Rue in the Hunger Games, though, which was really just a, I don't know, fun fact if you guys didn't know that. That was a long time ago. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I was just excited to see a whole different side of the Star Wars story, So we get into the Acolyte, right? And the first 2 episodes, which were released at the same time, were kind of being, they were built up, right? And it seemed like the first couple episodes people were a little bit hesitant on. Like they were like, okay, right? Like we're getting these episodes that have, certain problems with them, but definitely, have some potential. Was what the common consensus seemed to be from those first 2 episodes. And I would agree with that sentiment, actually. I think that the first 2 episodes presented us with a decent bit of potential. And I personally, and again, big spoilers for the first 4 episodes, I saw that twin twist coming from a mile away. As soon as she woke up, as soon as, May has that fight with Indara, Carrie-Anne Moss, and actually, I'll get back to that in a second. But as soon as she has that fight, and then the title card comes up, and then Osha wakes up, I was like, either there's a hallucination going on, or it's the same person, which I doubted, as she kind of moves around, or they're twins, which I was like, okay, that's interesting, makes some sense to me. Let's see where this goes from here. By the way, Lee Jung-jae from the beginning, really great. I know that this was his first major English speaking role. Does a fantastic job. You can kind of tell a little bit here and there, but for not really speaking English, fantastic job. I want to go back to Indara for a second, though, because I understand, right? There's, if, for example, if there's a major actor in a show or a story that you are looking forward to, being there, Carrie-Anne Moss being, one, for example, in The Acolyte. If there's a major actor that you're looking forward to being in your favorite show or in a new, property and franchise you love, I get it, right? When May kills Indara in the first 10 minutes of the show, 5 minutes of the show, I can imagine people being like, wait, what? And again, even, I even get that despite the fact that Indara comes back in flashbacks. Totally get that, right? It's something where, I understand how it could be a huge disappointment. For me personally, though, and I admit, Carrie-Anne Moss was not really the huge drawing point for me in the show, but I will say that you do what you do for the sake of the story, right? And if Carrie-Anne Moss was like, sign me up for this role, I get it, my character's gonna die, quote unquote, in the first episode, and then she'll be back in flashbacks, I get it, let's do it. You do what you need to do for the sake of the story. Like, I'm just imagining if that X character was replaced by anybody else, right? Like any other actress, for example. For the sake of the story, it's fine. It makes sense why that's happening that way. I think we can lament that later, right? For example, in the flashbacks, if in Indara, if Carrie-Anne Moss was giving this fantastic performance or whatever, or even in later projects where it's like, man, I wish Carrie-Anne Moss was, whatever. But even then, it's like there are so many capable actresses and actors out there who could fill roles that I just think that, look, you do what you have to do for the sake of the story. Now, if it was a dumb story decision to kill off a character like that, like, for example, I'm just thinking of, X-Men The Last Stand, right, where you kill off Cyclops and you kill off Professor X, and it's like, okay, like, did that really need to go the way that it did? Not really, no. And that to me is a little bit different than what went on here. But for me, I don't really have a problem with Indara and Kelnaka being killed off the way that they were, to kind of build the stakes of the story, right? To say that, look, May and or whoever is killing whoever killed Kelnaka, whoever it is under that mask, there is a real danger here. There's a real threat going on in the beginning. Like, we're not afraid to kill off our main characters here. So, I understand if a lot of you guys are disappointed by that, but for me, that's not something that particularly bothered me. Now, we go on through the beginning of the first couple episodes here, right? And we're getting this backstory of May, beginning to hunt for these 4 Jedi. Here we get some hints about this fire that's haunting Osha. We find out at the end of episode 2 that Osha didn't know, or May didn't know that Osha was alive. And we get a host of other kind of auxiliary High Republic characters. I will say that the actress who's playing Vernestra in the High Council, probably my least favorite character. I'm not, trying to bash on the actress, but the way that she's delivering her dialogue is just, I don't know, it's really not hitting me in the right way. And I will say that overall, in the first 4 episodes, the dialogue is definitely probably the weakest part of the story for me. There are just a lot of lines that are just so exposition heavy and are so in your face about what they're talking about, especially Vernestra talking to Sol. I mean, a lot of those lines are just really cringeworthy. Even some of the conversations that Osha has later on with Yord and with Jackie, who's played by Daphne Keane, it's just it just feels a little bit over the head. And I know a lot of people have also said, well, I guess that's kind of just the way that the prequel writing is. I get that as well. But still, it feels like a little bit of sloppy writing, if that makes sense. But it's not, for me, I mean, it's frustrating, but it's not enough to kind of derail my enjoyment of the show. So yeah, we get on with this story. We have, at the end of episode 2, I believe we have this sort of cliffhanger of this Sith Lord, or this, whoever that, that other guy is, or person is under that mask. And we kind of move on from there. So by the end of episode 2, Indara is dead, and Torben is dead, and then episode 4, Kenlaka is dead. And episode 3 is that big flashback episode, which a lot of people were very unhappy with. And I will say, yes, the witches are a little bit goofy. Power of 1, Power of 2, yeah, a little bit weird and goofy and not my favorite thing. But I did, really enjoy the interactions between Osha, the young Osha, and Sol when they first meet. And I think that the intrigue behind the fire and everything like that is something that will keep me interested. Episode 4 was fine. Episode 4, you kind of, it's a very short episode, and so I, wasn't super happy about that. I'm also not super thrilled about the idea of Kymir being the Sith Lord, or being the Acolyte himself, if that is some version of Plagueis, or if he's just a random Sith, because it seems like he is involved in this plot somehow as well. So I'm not, I'm also one of those people who's not particularly thrilled about that idea as well. So here's what I will say. And there is one other thing, by the way. Let me just talk about this really quickly before I get into why I think we should be a little bit more patient with this show than a lot of people are giving it credit for. And that's just my personal opinion, by the way. But I wanted to talk about one other thing that bothered me a lot in because this segment isn't really a play-by-play of the first 4 episodes. It's really more of just what I wanted to talk about in terms of I think that while we have a right to be very critical of this show in terms of the things that they haven't done well, in terms of writing and dialogue and visuals and whatnot and story, I think that we should be patient. I also think that there are legitimate criticisms to be had about this show, but again, it's not sort of a play-by-play on that. But I will say the one thing that really did bother me, and again, this could be explained later on, is May's really sudden turn to being this. She goes, "Oh, I had this vendetta against Kenlaka, but I'm just gonna ditch that and whatever." So that's not, it wasn't the best execution of that scene in general. But here's what I will say about the Acolyte. This is a show that is being presented to us as a kind of unraveling of a mystery, right? And I know that for those of you who are unaware of this, maybe this will be helpful information, but I think a lot of us are aware of the fact that this is a show where we're going to be able to flesh out the events of what is happening, what's going on slowly. Like, it's not all going to be revealed to us at once. And so what I'm frustrated about, from the perspective of somebody who is like, okay, maybe I didn't love the first 4 episodes. I liked them with significant problems, but I am not convinced that this is going to be truly the representation of how I enjoy the show at the end of the day, because this is a show that is going to unravel itself slowly throughout the next few episodes. And in fact, I do believe that Leslie Headland, who is the showrunner of the show, said that episode 5 is going to be a very pivotal episode where we get to see the fire and what happens on Brendock from several different perspectives. And here's the key to that, right? Because everybody's out here complaining, how does this happen? Why is this happening? I don't get it. This doesn't make sense. All this kind of, like, for example, I don't know, how did May start the fire? Or, there are so many other things that are going on. Like why does, May have this vendetta against these people? And what's going on here? And how is Osha this? And Sol this? And Indara this? And whatever. And my problem with that is that these people, and I'm not trying to, just pass judgment on all these, the people who are saying things like that. I just want to point out the fact that everyone who is saying this without the caveat that we haven't seen the whole picture, right? I actually had the same discussion with somebody about The Last Jedi, which was incredibly frustrating because this person that I was talking to had seen The Last Jedi, the whole movie. And we see this same technique in storytelling play out in The Last Jedi, where you have this scene, right, that's played out subjectively 3 different times, which is the burning of Luke's academy, right? We see it once from Luke's perspective, we see it once from Ben's perspective, and then we kind of see the amalgamation of both and what actually happened. And what was frustrating is that what this person that I was talking to was basically, he's someone who hates Luke in The Last Jedi, which, if you hate him in The Last Jedi, that's fine. That's whatever. I personally love him in The Last Jedi. Love the character progression in The Last Jedi, I should say, for Luke. But he was trying to base his argument off of Luke being a terrible person by trying to kill Ben Solo. And I was like, no, you have to look at what actually happened, right? In the whole context of those 3 individual scenes. And he told me he completely forgot that scene was played out 3 individual times. And that's my frustration with a lot of this commentary that's going on with the Acolyte, is that I think a lot of people are so ready to write off the whole story when we haven't seen it play out to fruition, right? Because I think that next episode, we're going to get a really full picture of what went on Brendok, why these characters are doing what they're doing, who the Sith Lord is, and all of that stuff that can be retroactively explaining what has gone on in the first 4 episodes. Now, to be clear, if you didn't like the way that the first 4 episodes were executed, regardless, it is completely your prerogative to stop watching the show, because that's the show's fault, frankly, for not engaging you enough to where, like, there are plenty of shows and movies that, are mysteries, right? And they are confusing in the first beginning part of it, because obviously they're confusing because you're trying to figure out what's going on and who did what and whatever. But they're engaging enough that you're willing to be confused for a long time, that by the time, like, they answer one question and they ask you 2 more until they get to the ending, right? And it is totally on the filmmakers and it is totally on the writers to engage you to that point. And if the Acolyte for the first 4 episodes hasn't done that, it is completely your prerogative to jump off the proverbial train, if you will, to get off the train, and not finish it, to its completion. That's totally fine, because that is on the show. But I think for those of us, or for those who are saying, I don't like this show because the story is bad or whatever, I mean, that's fine. But I'm frustrated because this is a show that is specifically designed to reveal things in ways that are not meant to be all at once. So people who are like, I don't know, like it's stupid that Kel Naka is sheltered in the woods. Well, I mean, if you watch the trailers, and again, I'm not blaming you if you haven't seen the trailers, but just for an example, if you watch the trailers, there's a lot more to Kel Naka in those flashbacks that we're going to see that will explain that. Like, it's just those kinds of things that are frustrating, that this is a story that isn't necessarily being told linearly. That I just wish that we all had maybe a little bit more patience for it, because I think that episode 5 in particular is going to explain a lot of what's been going on, and it's going to really flesh out why characters are doing what they're doing. Now, also, just in that same vein, because for me, I mean, I enjoy episodes 1 through 4. I'm not loving them, but I'm enjoying them enough to where I'm like, yeah, okay, episode 5, like, tell me what's going on. Because I think Leslie Headland has confirmed that episode 5 is going to be a key turning point for the series. That being said, if episode 5 is terrible, and if we get to the end of the show, right, and if they explain nothing, if the future flashbacks are all even more jumbled than the original flashbacks, and if the Sith Lord ends up being Chimera and it's terrible, yeah, I mean, of course, I'm going to hate the show, or, dislike the show to an extreme degree, because it didn't fulfill its promise of revealing a story that was satisfying. I just think at this point, right, for those of you who are on the fence about this show, I would just say, let's be a little more patient, because it's not the type of show, it's not like a sitcom, right, where you're just kind of watching the show linearly, and at a certain point you're like, I'm done, because I just don't like the show. Because, I mean, let's be honest, right, for example, with a sitcom, you watch the first maybe 10 episodes, and by that point, if you don't get a feel for the show, I mean, unless it's a show that really gets better later on, like Parks and Rec, for example. But let's just say it is what it is, right? You watch the first 10 episodes, and if you don't like the characters, and if you're not on board, chances are you're not going to like the next 9 seasons of the show. And you can kind of, you can say, I'm done, right? That's totally fine. Even the first season or whatever. I don't think a mystery or a show like this that's not presenting itself in a linear fashion is the same, right? I think that there's a lot more nuance to this that we have to take, because I think the show is trying to present itself with a bit more nuance than, a bit more than meets the naked eye. Again, I reserve the right to say episode 5 was so unsatisfying, and by the end of it, because I will probably finish the show no matter what, by episode 8, I'm like, this is terrible. I hate everything about the show. I just have a feeling, though, that by the time everything's revealed about it, and by the way, if even if we get the answers that are make the show more interesting and more satisfying for the audience, even if that, it's not going to justify the dialogue in the first 4 episodes. It's not going to make some of the visuals better, retroactively. But I just think it might put the story in a better context, and it might make everything make a little more sense. So for me personally, and to you guys out there, if you guys are on the fence about the Acolyte, my hope is that maybe we would have a little bit more patience with the show, because by the time that this podcast comes out, and hopefully I'll put the clip segment out a little bit earlier, a little bit before the 5th episode comes out, that we'll just have this understanding that maybe things will be, maybe things will reveal themselves in ways that were unexpected. It's frustrating because the Netflix model of, shows where they drop all the episodes at once might have actually benefited a show like this a little bit more. Again, I don't know. There's something about like watching this episode week to week that maybe is frustrating to a lot of Star Wars fans. I'm not sure. But again, those are just my thoughts about the show. I know that a lot of people are frustrated, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below.